What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over some things that you're going to want to do before the upcoming Star Wars Galactic Battle season. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below if you're excited for the upcoming Galactic Battle season or if you're kind of on the fence. I definitely am someone who's a bit more reserved and not really sure what to expect with this upcoming season. And this is a style of video I make for pretty much the end of every Fortnite season, because the game changes a decent amount season to season, and doing these things can make it easier for you to adjust to the new season and also help you enjoy Fortnite in a time where, you know, most people are kind of burnt out. Like the last week of a season, most people aren't that motivated to play and they're just kind of waiting for the new season to start. So doing some of these things can help you, you know, enjoy the current game more, go into next season and hopefully do better, and then also just improve at the game if that's something you're concerned about. The first is just going to be to finish the battle pass. This is pretty self-explanatory, but the battle pass for every season is exclusive to that season, and so once season 2 ends, you won't be able to level up or unlock anything from the season 2 battle pass. Some of these items will return to the shop later on, but that's like a year and a half from now. So if you don't finish leveling up the battle pass or don't get everything you want out of the battle pass, you're potentially going to have to wait a long time for it. So check the pass if you aren't already, you know, a high enough level to have gotten everything, and see, you know, what you want and if, you know, you have time to get it. If you are struggling to get XP, there's a lot of creative maps that give a lot of XP, especially like any sort of tycoon map typically gives a lot of XP and takes basically just time to get the XP. It's not hard at all. So make sure you do that if you don't want to miss out on everything. The next thing you're going to want to do before this new season comes is just to try different items. This is something that's more difficult to talk about than regular Fortnite seasons, because typically when we go from season to season, there's items that change, but there's also items that carry over. With this Star Wars season coming up, I'm not really sure what they're going to do here. This is the first time we've ever gotten a month-long collab season like this, and it wouldn't surprise me if all of the weapons for next season are Star Wars themed and we don't really have any regular Fortnite weapons. There is no sort of leak or anything to back that up. It's just my guess. And the reason why I'm saying that is because through trailers and through like art Fortnite has posted, we've seen so many different like Star Wars blasters that are going to be coming to the game next season. And if you think about the Fortnite loot pool, there's usually like 1 to 2 of every, you know, weapon type, like 1 to 2 ARs, 1 to 2 SMGs, 1 to 2 pistols, so on and so forth. And with this being a month-long season, I wouldn't be the most surprised if they go much harder into it being a collab season and into the theme than they would for like a regular collab season. When we had Chapter 5 Season 4, the Marvel season, there was a lot of Marvel themed items in the game, but there was also a lot of just regular Fortnite items because that was a full length, you know, regular Fortnite season. I think this being a month long only opens them up to, you know, making it more Star Wars. And if people don't like it, it's only a month long anyway, so it's not the biggest deal. So normally I would recommend people try different stuff. If you've only been using the Hollow Twister AR for all of Chapter 6, then switching it up and using something like the Burst not only can make the final few days of the season something different and something fun, but it can also make it help you if potentially the Hollow Twister AR does get vaulted. If we wake up in the new season and the Striker Burst was the best AR in the loot pool and, you know, the main option, having acclimated yourself to it for the final few days of the season would make it easier for you to adapt and hopefully help you play better when the new season starts. And you can make that argument for anything. If you've only been using the kneecap or bat, or and you've been relying on that a lot, maybe it's not here next season. We'll certainly have some sort of melee item with the lightsabers coming in. That's like a given, but maybe they won't be as good or they won't be as reliable. So if you have only been using melee weapons, you know, trying to get used to using guns again would definitely be recommended. The Rift launcher is something that I think is definitely going to be vaulted next season. And if you've been, you know, playing off that entirely and you haven't been using any of the other mobility items, you know, giving them a chance again and getting used to them again is another thing that could help you. But as I kind of already said, this season is the most unique in terms of like how the loot pool will be, or my expectations for it are like the most unique. So like, I really don't know what to say here. But even then, just, you know, using different items can help you play better when the time does come. Also, another thing that I typically talk about is going to be map changes, because usually with the Fortnite season, we don't know what is going to change on the map. So I would recommend landing at different POIs. That way, if you've only been landing at one spot every single game, you're not as griefed if that location does, get removed. But with this upcoming Star Wars season, Fortnite themselves actually posted the map early, and we know which POIs will be changing. Whiffy Wharf will be changing, Demon's Dojo will be changing, Hopeful Heights will be changing, and then also there is a POI on the left side of the map that is going to be changing as well. Shogun Solitude is, I believe, is what it's called. I blanked out on the name there. So Shogun Solitude, Whiffy Wharf, Demon's Dojo, and Hopeful Heights will be changing to be Star Wars themed locations. So if you've only been landing at one of those locations for the entirety of the season, or like the entirety of Chapter 6, I would recommend landing, somewhere else and trying to learn a different POI for this final week. That way, if the Star Wars season does, if you don't like the POI that gets added, you at least have something to fall back on. And then the same is kind of true for learning the areas around these new POIs, because oftentimes with new POIs, they'll be incredibly hot and they'll have like mythic weapons or bosses associated with them. And one of the easier plays to go for is to land somewhat nearby and then third party that POI or boss POI, right? And since we already know what locations are going to change next season, learning some of the outskirts area around those locations could also make it a little bit easier for you to adapt to the new season, if there does happen to be mythics and bosses at the new Star Wars POI, which I expect because of how frequently that happens in Fortnite. And so now the final few things are going to be mainly playstyle oriented. A lot of players, when they are new to a battle royale, they tend to play pretty passive and reserved because they really want to get wins. And a lot of people kind of lock themselves into this playstyle and just like consistently play like that. And something I've talked about in a lot of videos is if you are avoiding conflict and playing passive all the time, it makes it take much longer for you to actually improve, because every engagement you get in with an enemy is like an opportunity to get better and an opportunity to improve. And if you're just getting less engagements, you're going to improve at a slower rate. Someone who's hiding all game and getting in 1 to 2 fights over a 20-minute game is taking less away from like a fighting experience perspective than someone who's getting in like 10 to 15 fights a game, just with how timing really works out. So if you are someone who's been playing very passive and you don't really feel confident fighting, I would recommend trying to, break that habit and get in more fights throughout the next week, because in my opinion, that's something that will really help you improve. On top of that, something that's even more efficient for, getting in fights is going to be reload mode. If you haven't really played reload, you get to respawn if you have teammates alive, or, if you have respawns remaining in reload solos. And this is another game mode that will just allow you to get in fights much faster. There's less downtime between fights and there's less penalty for dying. So you can get in exponentially more fighting experience in a short time span. And then something that's even more efficient than reload is going to be creative mode. Any sort of creative deathmatch map where you can fight people, the downtime between fights is non-existent. You just respawn and keep fighting over and over again. And this is something where you can get in fights much faster. So if you are someone who you don't feel like you're comfortable fighting, I would highly recommend getting in more fights in BR. I would also recommend playing reload mode. And my best recommendation would be to play some sort of creative deathmatch map where you can fight people with no downtime and get in basically an entire day's worth of fights in like 15 to 20 minutes in the creative map. Like it's so much more efficient, and that's going to help you improve so much faster. And that confidence fighting goes a long way in battle royales. And it's something, as I said, that a lot of people lack or kind of skip out on because they do just really want to win. Reload mode in general would be something that I would recommend acclimating yourself with. If you are bored right now and you're not really enjoying the game and you're kind of burnt out and you haven't really played Reload, I would recommend playing it. I'm not the biggest fan of Reload personally, but as I kind of already touched on, this Star Wars season is potentially going to be something unique and different from the regular Fortnite. And that makes it something where maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. And if you just absolutely despise the Star Wars season, Reload is going to be an option for you next season. Reload isn't going anywhere, and it'll be a more grounded Fortnite style of game than what the Star Wars season will be if they go very hard on the Star Wars theme, and I'm fully expecting them to, as I've kind of already said a few times. So if you have been closed-minded about Reload or never really played it, give it a chance for this last week of the season, because it might be something that you end up preferring a lot in the Star Wars season if you don't enjoy that stuff. And as I kind of said already, it'll help you get better at fighting because you can get in fights faster and then improve faster. And then the final thing I'm going to talk about is going to be to potentially change any settings that you want to change. If you are comfortable playing the game and you feel like your settings are fine, that's awesome. Don't change anything. I've had my settings pretty much the same for like years at this point. But if you are someone who, like, you know, your sensitivity is like too slow and you haven't gotten around to changing it, you know, or you know your keybinds are inefficient, but you just haven't gotten around to changing it, this would be a time where, you know, maybe this last week of the season, you put time into changing those settings and getting acclimated to the new settings. That way you can improve in the long run. Oftentimes changing settings, you take, you know, a step or two backwards to take several forward in the long run. And so if there is something that you've, you know, wanted to change or thought about changing, this final week of the season would be a decent time to try it, because, you know, who really cares if you win less games in the last week of the season? You know, it doesn't really matter that much at the end of the day. It doesn't matter regardless of when the season is, but like most people tend to care less at the end of the season and they're bored playing. Changing those settings can give you a new perspective on playing and give you something to actually work towards. So if there is something you've wanted to change, I would recommend doing it now. If there isn't anything you want to change, don't change it. I'm not saying you need to change things, but a lot of times people will kind of have things in the back of their mind that they do want to change or do want to adjust, but they never really get around to it. And end of season is a great time to do that. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more. If you would like to use my code in the item shop, it is EvolveJake, just like my channel name. It is underneath the webcam at all times. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.